I've gone ahead and temporarily set the top in place and installed the router lift just to kind of get a feel for things. I actually, both the lift and the top came from Woodpecker, and this is the Sidewinder lift that they make. And the idea behind the Sidewinder lift is that although most router lifts you can adjust from the top, this allows you to adjust it from the side. And this has a little hand crank that I can set up, and I can turn this and that'll do my fine adjustment. I can do the gross adjustment from the top. My goal is to have both the lift mechanism, the hand crank, and the on-off switch come out through this port over here. I've already installed a couple of blocks, and I've cut a piece that will fit in here. And I'll be routing both the lift wire and the cords into this section. This is where kind of all that stuff will be neatly tucked away. I've gone ahead, the lift kit came with a bronze bushing, and I went ahead and just installed that so that it would go through this wall here with a little bit of epoxy. We're going to see how that holds up. I kind of had some issues there, and we don't know what's going to happen. One of the things I want to point out is when I was designing this router table, this was kind of the area that I started with as my biggest concern was where was this going to sit in here. And what I did is I lowered the router down as far as I could in the lift, and that determined the height of this. Need to make sure, the one thing I didn't make sure of though was whether or not it would accommodate this flex cable here. Luckily it does, but just barely. So other than that, everything looks like it's going pretty good. Once the epoxy dries on the bushing that's going through here, I'll go ahead and drill a hole and mount that in the face, as well as this on-off switch. This is just real common on-off switch. When I got it, it gave me the choice of either coming out through the bottom or going out through the top. I wanted it out through the back so I can hide all my cords neatly inside. So I had to modify it just a little bit, but it looks like it'll work out just fine. And that's just going to mount right here. The only problem I might have is that this big paddle down here may interfere with the drawer that will be below that. If so, I'll just have to trim a 1/4 inch off of that or something like that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify, once I set the top up here, I'm going to identify where it's touching any high spots, and it's really tight in here. There's only like 2 or 3 little spots that it's actually sitting on, and I'll just take a belt sander, bring those down so everything is level. That way that when I tighten the top down, I don't telegraph any warpage into the top. And I plan on keeping this router table for at least 40 years, just because I don't want to have to do another one. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'll go ahead and identify and make some holes in this board here to receive both the flex cable and the cords. To identify where I wanted everything to go, I just put this board in place. As you can see, I've already laid out the holes and held up, in this case, the crank to see where it'd go to make sure it was going to clear at the top. And I also held up the switch over here to make sure I could locate the switch without interfering with the crank. The only problem that I'm going to have to get these 2 clearances that I want, I am going to have a little bit of tight spot down here, and I may run in front of this drawer front, but that should be okay. And then when there's a door over here, I'm also going to have trouble with possibly running into this area too, and preventing me from opening the door if the crank was in this position. But I'll have to live with that. I went ahead, I drilled a 3/4 inch hole there, and that's going to receive this hollowed out bolt right here. That can go in like that. There's a corresponding nut on the other side, and then my crank will just simply go in like that. Okay. For the power outlet, basically I had two prongs coming out the back side, and I just identified first of all where I wanted this along here. Measured my distance, made sure I had the right size hole. I had to make it a little bit bigger to receive the bigger plug in on here. Went ahead, drilled that out, and now it fits in there very nicely. So when I'm done, this is what the front of my router table will look like. I'll be able to both turn it on and adjust the height from the front. That's exactly what I was hoping to do. Also, this board, I'm only going to put it in with screws so that I can remove them as necessary if I ever need to get in and deal with any issues back here. I'm almost ready to go ahead and move the router table down onto the floor. But before I do that, I'm going to glue some blocks into each corner so I can attach some leveling feet to it. The feet will just be, I'll put in this little threaded insert into the blocks, and then I'll be able to use this foot and I can adjust it up and down as necessary to make sure that it doesn't rock and I have a good stable base to work from. To attach the blocks, I'm just going to use some glue and some screws. I'll hold everything in place temporarily with a clamp so I can put my screws in. To receive the threaded insert, I'm going to go ahead and drill a 1/2 inch hole into the bottom of each block. Once the hole is drilled, I can just go ahead and insert the threaded insert. Now, I don't have a screwdriver big enough to span this gap, so I'm just going to use this old chisel as my screwdriver. Don't worry, the chisel needs to be reground, so this isn't a problem. I've gone ahead and set the router table down onto the floor and kind of moved it in roughly where I want its final position. I went to install the lift section underneath, and I ran into a problem because this is kind of a warts and all woodworking podcast. I wanted to make sure you saw it. When I attached the riser blocks, or the blocks underneath to attach the feet to, they got just in the way of the corner of this sheet of plywood that everything is attached to. So I'm just going to have to cut out a notch in each corner to fit around those blocks. It's not a big deal, but it is something that I wasn't thinking about when I went ahead and attached those pieces of wood. So I'm just going to use a saw here real quick and I'll cut those away. Now that the router is down on the ground, we can start to install the top. The first thing I've done is gone through and just kind of looked and see where there's any place where I could see where it was holding up high, and I'm going to take those down. I've just kind of placed some tape around the edges, and I can go back and take those down so I make sure I have a nice solid contact with the whole top. And I'm just going to take it down with a belt sander. I've identified 3 areas so far, and you can see it marked with the blue tape, that look a little bit high. And I see some other areas that I might just go ahead and take down as well, just to make sure we got a good base for the top. Well, I've gone ahead and finished leveling the top with the belt sander, and everything fits nice and flush. And now what I need to do is locate holes so that I can connect the top to the carcass. Now, this top was actually designed to go with one of Woodpecker's metal router stands, which is fine, except that it doesn't quite fit with what I want. They did, however, include all the hardware for that to attach it to that stand, which included some 1024 screws. Now, these are only 1/2 inch long, and so they're way too short to go through 3/4 inch plywood and then into the top. So I'm going to go ahead and get some screws that are the right length. The big problem here is, how do I locate where those screw holes are going to go? So what I've done, just as an example here, I cut the top of one of the screws of a screw off that's a little bit longer, and I just put it in my drill press and used a file so that I can bring it down to a nice sharp point. I'm going to do that with several so that I can put them in, press the top down, get it located where I want, and then press the top down, and then at that point, we're now ready to go ahead and install the top. The first thing I've done is I put a couple pieces of scrap blocks down. I've put a few points that I've made into the top, and they're facing down. They're all about the same thickness out. I'll go ahead and place my top down, And I want to make sure that everything gets lined up just right. To line up the edges, I've gone ahead and just made a I went ahead and put together a little piece of wood here with a straight edge that I could hold up to make sure that it was nice and square along both sides, and that we had the same exposure. So I feel like I have the right exposure. I'm just going to go clamp this in place, and that'll keep things from moving around. I'm also checking to make sure that I have a little bit more of a extra area out in the front in case I ever want to put clamps on this. That was one of the things I wanted to make sure I designed into it. Now that everything's exactly where I want it to be, I'm just going to slide this out, set it down in place, and I'll do the same with this one. Now just some good pressure. We'll set those pins and I'll know exactly where to drill. Okay, so I have 3 well-marked spots for all my drilling to go, and I'll do that next. Just using a 1/4 inch brad point bit. I can take the pins out now and move them over to another hole, and I'll just insert some screws and start the process over again. Before I put the pins down, I'm going to go ahead and run some screws up into the holes that through the holes I just drilled and into the piece to locate it. Before I do a final installation on the top, I'm going to drill 2 holes. A 4-inch hole in the back over here for dust collection, and then a smaller one along this inside wall for the cord from the router to pass through. I don't want to put my dust collection through the back because it's going to be up against the machinery and be easier to run in through the side. And all I have to do is make one drawer a little bit shorter when I actually dress this out. To run the cord through the compartment, I'm going to use an 1 1/8" hole saw. Oh, we're finally ready to install the top, and to do that I'm just using some 1 1/4" number 10 24 thread screws. So. Now that we have the top installed, we're ready to drop in the router lift. And you get an idea of what this router table is going to look like. The manufacturer supplies these set screws that are used to get the router insert flush with the top of the router table top. After I got the top installed, I went ahead and ran the wires through into the compartment over here and attached my switch and my lever. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is before I had my adjustment knob on the other side. it just didn't feel right when I was working on it, so I switched it over, just flipped it around, and it seems to work much better. I drilled an 1.1 hole out the back to run the cord through, and before I ran it all the way through and pulled it tight, I went ahead and tied a knot in it so I couldn't accidentally unplug it. Everything is working really good. If we look at our router lift, or if we look at our lift, our mobile base, we can just, it's doing a great job. It goes ahead and lifts this up. This is probably close to 200 pounds and it has no problem lifting it up. I could probably jump on here and it wouldn't be an issue. And you can see it rolls really nicely. So really happy with that. Next time we'll build and install all the drawers as well as the door in here and install the dust collection system and maybe put a fence on it. As usual, I always appreciate your comments, questions, or suggestions. The website is up and going. I'm trying to add content as we go, but your input is also needed on that as well. So until next time, keep it level, plumb, and square.